This is the Mercedes C43 AMG. And if you're into fast Mercs, which I'm not, this is basically Genesis. You see, this was the first car that AMG actually built. Now, I am no expert in these matters at all, and I invite you to help me fill in some of the blanks in the comments section, but AMG, unlike BMW's M division, actually started life as an entirely separate company. And after a good number of years, they eventually became part of the big beast that is Mercedes-Benz. They did a number of models where they essentially fettled an existing car that had already been produced on the regular production line and making it a little bit spicier. This car, however, was built from the ground up at Affalterbach. For those of you unaware, this is a W202, and I'll confess I did have to look this up. My favourite generation of the C-Class is the W204, and this is actually the first C-Class, which replaced the legendary 190E, and it's got a bit of a brutal look about it. It's a real slab-sided, muscular-looking thing. This isn't a pretty car, this is a serious car. And it comes from a much simpler time. That C43 badge does mean that this car has, under the bonnet, a 4.3 litre naturally aspirated V8. Now, there was also at the time a C36, but this was, as mentioned, not built by AMG, it was fettled by them. So this car's rather special. I'm also very grateful to its incredibly kind and anonymous owner for lending it to me, because this is in absolutely gorgeous condition inside and out. I know he's just spent a lot of time and effort getting the paintwork up to scratch, or rather scratch free, and it's really looking good for it. This interior actually is this really kind of bonkers mix of gorgeous, beautiful leather and 1990s switchgear. One of my favourite things is the little controls down the side here for the lumbar support in the seat. They're very vocal when you let them down. Perhaps my least favourite thing is the cruise control stalk down here. I don't know what it is with Mercedes. They got this thing, perhaps somebody can please explain this to me, why they have this thing against putting stalks on both sides of the steering wheel, because it just makes life difficult. Now, in most cars you have the indicator stalk at the top and the cruise control can be hidden down here where it should be. This car is the other way around, so when I first got in it I did try and indicate left with the cruise control stalk, so it took me a minute to figure out what on earth I was doing wrong. Other cool retro features in this car are the very classic parking sensors. So there's a little display in the back and there's a couple here which show you what the parking sensors are doing. So when you reverse, rather than waiting for the beep, you look and you see a little dial kind of going up, the bars fill out as you get closer to an object behind, and they actually do work. Now, this car puts out about 300 horsepower and about 300 pound-foot of torque from that engine. So not crazy figures, but it's brisk enough, and that's mated to a 5-speed automatic gearbox, which was a relative novelty at the time. You see, the 36 was available with a 4-speed as standard. They all got upgraded a bit later on. I did a little bit of research on these in terms of what actually goes wrong, and the major thing seems to be rust in some of them, or I don't believe it's quite as prevalent as some of the later models, which were really notorious for tin worm. And in the early cars you had the biodegradable wiring harness that Mercedes used in all sorts of things as well. I know people mentioned it in my review of the 600 SEL, and that can cost a few £100s to put right, but later cars like this one, which is from 2000, so a very late car indeed, doesn't suffer from the issue at all. It feels very solid, very well made in here. I love the two-tone leather scheme, and there's a surprising amount of carbon fibre in here too. I suspect that that's in here because by the time this car was on sale, it was a very old model, and Mercedes probably wanted to do everything they could to tart it up and make it a bit more appealing in the showroom. Now, one thing which is totally missing from this car is any easy way to change gear manually. Now, you can, of course, like in a lot of auto boxes, tell it whether you want it in first, second, third, fourth, or whack it into drive, but there are no steering wheel mounted paddles, and there's no just a simple up and down here. They really do want you to just let the gearbox do its own thing. The one figure which I do find particularly impressive with this car is actually the weight figure. Now, Mercedes claimed around 1,470 kilos for this car, which is a touch optimistic, but in reality it only weighs about 1,550 fully laden, and that is a good 200 kilos lighter than any modern AMG, so that does go some way to making this car feel brisk, if not outright fast, because that's just not the sort of car that it is. In terms of handling and ride, it's a bit of an odd one really. You can feel the fact that this car has a firmer suspension than you'd expect of a Mercedes at the time. You can certainly hear the fact that you're going over many little lumps and bumps, and although they're being transmitted to the car, they're not really being transmitted to me, so I know that this is happening, but it doesn't actually bother me too much. The steering is quite slow. You do need to turn it quite a bit. The wheel itself is pretty gangster to hold. It's this big 4-spoke classic 90s item with this bit of, well, it's not really white, it's a kind of light grey leather perforated at the top, and the rest of it's solid black leather. It's a real nice thing. And I love the white dials down here. Again, standard. Other luxuries in this car include the fully electric seats, and I believe it has xenon headlights as well, which is very much novel for 2000. Now, if you want to buy one of these today, you'd be looking, I suppose, at anywhere from maybe about £7,000 or £8,000 upwards. I did do a little bit of research earlier to see if I could get you some rough ideas of prices, but the fact is that they're actually quite a rare thing indeed. And this car's owner tells me that it's one of less than 500 examples that were ever imported into the United Kingdom in right-hand drive. So if you're a fan of the lesser spotted Mercedes, this is it. This is a proper sleeper car, and it comes from a very different era. Nowadays people want their AMGs to be big and brash and loud. I'd love to drive one of the supercharged AMG cars as well, because they did dabble with that for a little while before they decided that their thing was big, naturally aspirated V8s, and obviously nowadays they're known for their twin turbo motors, which are pretty damn good, I have to confess, even not being much of a turbo fan. Now, I suppose, before I get back onto the fun stuff, this is a good time for me to ask you, what's your favourite AMG? What do you really like? I would love to say that I would then go and ask Mercedes if I could drive whatever is popular, but I have spoken to Mercedes briefly, and they were by far the rudest and least helpful PR department I've ever come across. And if I wasn't going to get a Mercedes before, I'm definitely not now. Like all naturally aspirated V8s, the engine does need revs to get it moving, which is what makes it so frustrating that it's coupled to this automatic box. Now, I'm going to try and be brave and attempt to shift myself and see if we can make things a little bit better. It is actually, like many auto boxes, quite long geared. Responds so nicely, and actually you can carry a surprising amount of speed down a road like this. Now, I have to remember the fact that this is of course an old car and not mine, and it's wearing very small tyres too, two 517s at the front and two 45s at the back. AMG seem to have this thing about never putting rubber that's really big enough on their cars. In fairness, on this car it's probably about okay, but some of the later cars, especially the 6.2 W204, they just really under-tired them. Now, this is a popular testing road that I use a lot, and it's got a real mix of sort of tight, twisty stuff and the more fast-flowing things. And this steering, look at this, so you can probably see, like, I can just do whatever I want, and the car will just not... I don't think it's the steering that's actually slow, it's just the whole car, everything's a bit soft, so it's not too keen to respond. You've got to be very progressive. You can't really change your mind with this thing mid-corner. It's It actually does soften out quite nicely once you get it going, and it does make a really nice noise. Here, just let me show you guys something. You couldn't do this in a more... Look at that. Any other car, if I was doing that in a McLaren, my passenger would currently be utterly and completely screaming. But very long throttle pedal as well, really long travel on that, so you have to kind of, if you want all the engine's got, you got to put your foot right down. I do like that. But this is a nice thing to make progress in, but if I'm being totally honest, I'm not entirely sure the car's happy with me doing this with it. I mean, it'll do it, but slightly begrudgingly, and what I really should be doing is kicking it into drive, taking it easy and just driving briskly down here and enjoying things. And it does actually really soften out. So this is not an M3 rival. It really, really isn't. And I suppose with this car's really an E36 M3 rival, and I've never driven one of those, and it's sort of nearly on sale with the E46, but even the C32, which I suppose is the replacement for this, was never billed as much of a great handling car. So it's a different thing entirely, and it's also very different from a contemporary Audi as well. It is ultimately not maybe that different from the Mondeo ST220 that I drove recently, although it is considerably more luxurious and refined in here. It's a very nice saloon car, but a pretty tidy engine. They were a lot of money back in the day. You're talking nearly £50,000 for one of these, probably just over once you've optioned it up. And it's a big old brute of a thing. In many ways, I guess this is part of that kind of last breed of great Mercs, and I would never buy one of these. For me, the gearbox kind of kills the enjoyment. If this had a 5-speed manual in it and you put a tasty exhaust on it, stiffened up the suspension a bit, it would be a lot of fun. But then it wouldn't really be this anymore. What you'd be doing is trying to make it into an M3. And I'm kind of glad that it's not, but I've actually hustled it a lot more briskly than I thought would be possible. So I do kind of like it. It's cool, and it's a bit different. So thank you guys for watching. As always, please comment below if you haven't already. Do hit the subscribe button. We recently hit 31k, which I am super happy and very grateful about. I apologise, there hasn't really been a celebratory special for 30k yet, but it all happened very fast. And we'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.